Lucas Matthews had always been an ordinary man, or so he thought. A young, ambitious space engineer, he was stationed on the newly discovered planet of Varnix, where humanity had started building its first colony. Varnix was a mysterious world, full of strange landscapes and unknown species, but Lucas had always found excitement in exploring the unknown. Little did he know, today would be different. It was the first day of a routine mission to inspect the colony's infrastructure when Lucas met Seraphia, an alien girl with unusual silver eyes and an aura that radiated both beauty and mystery. She was a member of the Valerithian species, an ancient and powerful race that had existed on Varnix long before humans arrived. Lucas had seen a few Valerithians before, but Seraphia stood out. Her presence was almost magnetic, drawing him in despite his best efforts to focus on his work. She appeared calm, with an elegance in her movements, as if every step she took was calculated and purposeful. Yet it was not her beauty or grace that caught Lucas off guard. It was what she said. "I recognize you," she said, her voice soft but filled with certainty. "Your touch, it looks familiar." Lucas paused, his heart skipping a beat. He was sure he had never met her before. His mind raced. "Recognize me." The thought echoed in his mind, but he couldn't place it. He glanced around, unsure if she was talking to him or someone else. "I'm sorry. I don't think I know you," Lucas replied, though his voice lacked the confidence he usually had. It wasn't that he was afraid. He just couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Her words seemed to carry a weight, a truth he couldn't grasp. Seraphia didn't respond immediately, instead narrowing her eyes as though trying to read his thoughts. "You don't remember me, but I remember you," she said. "In another time, perhaps even in another life." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. What was she saying? He wasn't sure what to make of her words. It wasn't just a passing comment. There was something deeper in her gaze, something that made his stomach twist with confusion. The look in her eyes was almost like recognition, a connection he couldn't explain. "Maybe you're just mistaken," Lucas said, trying to dismiss the feeling of unease creeping over him. "I'm just a regular engineer. Nothing special." Seraphia smiled, though it wasn't a smile of amusement. It was a smile that held 1,000 unsaid words, one that felt too old for someone as young as her. She nodded slowly, as if acknowledging something that Lucas couldn't understand. "Perhaps," she said quietly. "But you will remember, Lucas Matthews. You will." Before he could respond, Seraphia turned and walked away, her movements as graceful as a whisper in the wind. Lucas stood there for a moment, staring after her, his mind racing. What had just happened? Had she said his name? How did she know it? The words she spoke echoed in his mind, each one more puzzling than the last. He had never seen her before, never interacted with her. Yet something in his gut told him that this encounter wasn't random. There was something about Seraphia, something ancient and powerful. And deep down, Lucas felt that meeting her was the beginning of something far bigger than anything he could have imagined. After his strange meeting with Seraphia, Lucas couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. "I recognize you." Her words echoed in his mind long after their conversation ended. He tried to focus on his work, but the nagging thought of her kept coming back, like a puzzle that he couldn't solve. Who was she really? And why did she seem to know so much about him? That night, Lucas lay awake in his small quarters, staring at the ceiling. His thoughts kept circling back to Seraphia and her mysterious words. The more he thought about it, the more unsettling it became. How could she recognize him? He had never been to Varnix before. He had never even left Earth until the past year. So why did her words feel so familiar? The next morning, Lucas woke up feeling strange. His dreams from the night before had been vivid and strange, filled with images that made no sense. He saw landscapes that weren't from Earth, ancient ruins, and people he didn't know. The images flashed by in a blur, but there was one thing he clearly remembered. In his dreams, there had been a woman with silver eyes, just like Seraphia's. She was standing in front of him, her hand reaching out. And then everything went dark. Just a dream, Lucas muttered to himself, shaking off the strange feeling. But deep down, he knew it wasn't just a dream. He couldn't explain it, but something about it felt real. Later that day, Lucas met with his colleagues at the colony. They were discussing the progress of the infrastructure, but Lucas could barely concentrate. His mind kept drifting back to Seraphia and the dreams. He had to know more about her. There was something important about her, something he couldn't quite grasp. As he walked through the colony's research facility, Lucas overheard a conversation between two scientists. They were discussing the Valorithian people, and one of them mentioned an ancient legend that caught Lucas's attention. The Valorithians have always believed in reincarnation, the scientist said. It's said that certain individuals can return to the same world again and again, each time with the ability to change the course of history. Some believe that their ancestors can even recognize these individuals, though it's extremely rare. Lucas's heart skipped a beat. Reincarnation. The idea seemed ridiculous, but the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. What if Seraphia was right? What if there was something about him, something deep inside him, that connected him to this alien race? He needed to find out more. Later that evening, Lucas went to the colony's archives. He scoured the records, looking for any mention of the Valorithians and their legends. The more he read, the more he found connections between the ancient stories and his own strange dreams. One legend stood out, a tale about an ancient race that had once lived among the stars, a race that could manipulate time itself. The legend spoke of a chosen one who would return to bring balance to the universe, a being who would be born again when the time was right. As Lucas sat in the dimly lit archive room, a sense of realization hit him. Could it be? Could he somehow be connected to this ancient prophecy? The more he thought about it, the more certain he became. But he still didn't know how or why. His mind raced with questions. What did Seraphia know that he didn't? And why did he feel like their meeting wasn't just a chance encounter? The answers were just out of reach, but Lucas knew one thing for sure. His life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. With a deep breath, Lucas decided he would find out the truth. The connection between him and Seraphia was more than just a coincidence. It was a link to something far greater, something that could change everything. The days following his discovery in the archives were filled with a sense of unease that Lucas couldn't shake. The more he learned about the Valorithians, the more confused he became. There were stories, legends, and prophecies that seemed to point toward him, but he still didn't understand why. Everything felt like a puzzle, and Lucas was desperate to find the missing pieces. That evening, Lucas decided to confront Seraphia. He had to know what she knew. Maybe she could explain what was happening to him. He couldn't keep living with this uncertainty, not when everything in his gut was telling him that there was something important at play. He found Seraphia standing alone by the colony's research observatory, staring up at the stars. Her silver eyes reflected the light from the distant galaxies, giving her an almost ethereal appearance. She turned as he approached, a faint smile appearing on her face. "I knew you'd come," Seraphia said softly, her voice calm and almost knowing. It was as if she had been waiting for him. Lucas hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I've been learning about your people," he began. "The Valorithians. Their history, their legends. There's one that caught my attention. Something about reincarnation and a chosen one. I think that's me, isn't it?" Seraphia looked at him intently, her silver eyes searching his face, as if trying to find the right words. "It is," she said finally. "You are the one, Lucas, the one who was chosen to restore balance. But it's not just a coincidence. This connection between us, between you and my people, is much older than you realize." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. He wanted to ask more questions, but Seraphia was already speaking again, her voice growing more serious. "Long ago, before your people discovered Varnix, there was an ancient civilization. The Valorithians were not the first inhabitants of this planet, nor were we the most powerful. We were part of an alliance, a union with another race that could manipulate time itself. Lucas blinked, his mind racing. Manipulate time? He asked, struggling to understand. What do you mean? Seraphia nodded slowly, as if gathering her thoughts. There was a time when the Valorithians and the Agarthians, a race of beings capable of bending time and space, lived together in harmony. They shared knowledge, technology, and power. But something went wrong. The Agarthians. They vanished, leaving us behind. It is believed that they were lost to time, scattered across different eras of the universe. Lucas's heart raced. Are you saying that my people, humans, are somehow connected to the Agarthians? Seraphia's eyes met his, her gaze serious. Yes, Lucas. The Agarthians left a part of themselves behind. When they vanished, some of their memories and abilities were passed on to your kind. You, Lucas Matthews, carry the key to that lost knowledge. Lucas shook his head in disbelief. How? How is that even possible? Seraphia placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. It is not something easily understood, but the chosen ones are born with the ability to connect to the past. The memories of the Agarthians lie dormant inside of you, waiting to be awakened. 1,000 questions flooded Lucas's mind, but before he could ask another, Seraphia continued. This is why I recognize you. You are part of the forgotten history, part of something that was lost when the Agarthians were scattered. The fate of the Valorithians and the future of your people rests with you. It has always been you. Lucas felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. He had always thought of himself as just a simple engineer, a small cog in the wheel of the universe. But now he realized that his purpose was far greater than he could have ever imagined. What am I supposed to do with all of this? Lucas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Seraphia's eyes softened. You must remember. The time has come to restore what was lost. The key lies in your memories, Lucas, but you are not alone. I will help you unlock them. As the night sky stretched out above them, Lucas felt an overwhelming sense of destiny. He didn't know what was coming next, but he knew one thing for sure. The world he knew was about to change forever. The days following his conversation with Seraphia were filled with a whirlwind of questions and emotions. Lucas couldn't shake the weight of what she had told him. He had always thought of himself as an ordinary man, but now he was being told he was connected to a hidden history, a forgotten race, and an ancient power. He couldn't stop thinking about the Agarthians, a race that could manipulate time and space. Were they real? Were they still out there? And why was he, of all people, the one chosen to carry their knowledge? Lucas had spent days trying to process everything Seraphia had shared. It was overwhelming, to say the least. But the more he thought about it, the more certain he became. There was something inside of him, something buried deep within his mind, that was connected to the Agarthians. He could feel it, like a distant echo, waiting to be awakened. One night, Lucas sat alone in his quarters, staring at the stars through his window. His thoughts drifted back to Seraphia and her calm, knowing gaze. She had said that he was the chosen one, that his memories were the key to restoring balance to the universe. But how? He had no idea where to begin, and the weight of his responsibility felt almost too much to bear. As if on cue, a soft knock on his door broke the silence. Lucas stood up quickly, his heart racing. He wasn't expecting anyone. When he opened the door, he found Seraphia standing in the hallway, her silver eyes meeting his with a quiet intensity. I know you're confused, Seraphia said, her voice gentle but firm. But there's something you need to understand. The Agarthians left behind more than just their memories. They left behind a power, a force that can change the course of history. And you, Lucas, are the one who can unlock it. Lucas swallowed hard, his mind racing. How? How can I unlock it? Seraphia stepped into his room and closed the door behind her. She didn't speak for a moment, Her gaze focused on him as if searching for something in his expression. Finally, she spoke. "You have already started," she said. "The memories you've been seeing, the dreams, the flashes of the past, they are the beginning. But there is more. You must learn to tap into the power that lies dormant inside you. It's not just about remembering. It's about harnessing the energy that the Agarthians left behind." Lucas shook his head, unable to fully understand. "I don't know how to do that. I'm just an engineer. I don't have any special abilities." Seraphia's eyes softened, and she placed a hand on his arm. "You are more than just an engineer, Lucas. You are the key. You have the potential to do things that no one else can." Her words were comforting, but they also filled him with fear. What if he couldn't do it? What if he wasn't strong enough to carry the weight of this responsibility? Seraphia seemed to read his thoughts. "Don't worry," she said. "I will help you unlock your abilities. You won't be alone in this." There was a moment of silence as Lucas tried to absorb everything she was saying. Finally, he nodded. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew he couldn't turn back now. Whatever power the Agarthians had left behind, it was up to him to find it and use it. Seraphia smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "Good. The first step is to connect with the energy inside you. I will guide you." For the first time since meeting Seraphia, Lucas felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could do this. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he was no longer afraid. With Seraphia's help, he would uncover the truth about his past and his future. Lucas stood in the quiet of his room, a mix of nervousness and excitement swirling inside him. Seraphia had promised to help him unlock the power hidden deep within, the power of the Agarthians. But as he waited for her, doubt began to creep in. Could he really do this? Could he truly connect to a force that was beyond his understanding? He had no special training, no extraordinary abilities, just an ordinary engineer from Earth. Seraphia's voice broke through his thoughts. "Are you ready?" Lucas looked up to see her standing at the door, her silver eyes glowing softly in the dim light. She seemed calm, almost serene, but Lucas could sense the urgency beneath her composed exterior. "I think so," he said, though his voice wavered slightly. "But how do I even begin? I don't understand any of this." Seraphia stepped closer to him, her gaze intense. The Agarthians were beings of immense power, and they left behind more than just their memories. They left a connection to the very fabric of the universe, a power that binds time, space, and reality itself. It lies within you, Lucas. You must learn to tap into it, to reach beyond the limitations of your mind and soul. Lucas swallowed hard. "And how do I do that?" Seraphia placed a hand on his chest, just above his heart. "Close your eyes. Focus on your breathing. Clear your mind. Let go of everything you think you know. The key is not in your thoughts, but in your feelings. You must trust what's inside you." Lucas hesitated for a moment, then slowly obeyed, closing his eyes and focusing on his breathing. At first, it was hard to quiet his thoughts. The doubts, the questions, the fear, they all buzzed in his mind, loud and overwhelming. But Seraphia's presence was calming, and gradually, his thoughts began to slow. With each breath, he felt himself sink deeper into a sense of stillness, as though time itself was stretching out around him. He felt connected to something larger than himself. It was as if the universe itself was flowing through him, a river of energy that was both strange and familiar. Suddenly, a vision flashed before his eyes. He saw a vast city, an ancient city, full of towering structures made of shining stone. The streets were empty, the buildings grand and untouched by time. It was beautiful, and yet something felt wrong. Then he saw a figure, a tall being with glowing eyes, standing in the center of the city. The being looked at him, and Lucas felt a rush of emotions, memories, pain, and a sense of loss. But most of all, he felt power. Immense power, as if the very essence of the Agarthians was flowing through him. Focus, Lucas, Seraphia's voice whispered in his ear. This is just the beginning. You are connecting to their past, to the power they left behind. But you must remember, it is not just about the memories. It is about the energy, the force that binds everything together. The vision began to fade, and Lucas opened his eyes, gasping for air. His heart was racing, his body trembling with the intensity of the experience. He looked at Seraphia, who was watching him carefully. I saw something, Lucas said, still trying to process the vision. A city, a being, power. It was so real. But I don't understand. Seraphia nodded. You are starting to remember, Lucas. The Agarthians left behind traces of their energy, and you are beginning to connect with it. But this is just the beginning. There is more to discover. Lucas felt a sense of awe wash over him. He had never experienced anything like this before. The power, the connection to the Agarthians, was real, and it was inside him. But as much as it excited him, it also terrified him. What would happen when he unlocked all of it? What kind of power would he have to control? Don't be afraid, Seraphia said, sensing his fear. You are not alone in this. We will uncover the truth together. Lucas nodded, though he still felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. There was so much more to learn, so much more to uncover. But one thing was certain, his life would never be the same again. The days that followed Lucas's first experience with the Agarthian power were a blur. Each time he tried to meditate and tap into the energy that Seraphia had told him about, it felt like his mind was pulling in different directions. The visions, the feelings, the knowledge. It was all there, but it was fragmented, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. Lucas wasn't sure if he was ready for what came next. The power he had felt, that rush of energy, was overwhelming. What if he couldn't control it? What if it consumed him? But Seraphia seemed confident. She was always calm, always guiding him forward with her quiet presence. She had spent hours with him, helping him unlock more memories, helping him make sense of the strange visions that flooded his mind. Yet Lucas knew that something more was coming. It wasn't just about remembering. It was about learning to control the power within him. You've made great progress, Seraphia said one morning as they stood together outside the colony's main building. But now, you need to test your abilities. You need to see if you can control the power that's awakening inside you. Lucas looked at her, his heart pounding in his chest. What do you mean by test? Seraphia's silver eyes glowed softly in the daylight. I've been guiding you, but it's time for you to take the next step. You need to use the energy. Focus it, control it, and release it. Only then will you truly understand your connection to the Agarthians. Lucas swallowed. He had never felt more nervous in his life. He wasn't a warrior, and he had no training in using strange powers. He had been a simple engineer, fixing machines, solving problems. This was something entirely different. But Seraphia was right. If he wanted to unlock his true potential, he had to take the next step. He had to face the unknown. All right, Lucas said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. What do I need to do? Seraphia smiled faintly. We'll start with something simple. Focus on a single object, something small. Channel your energy into it, and see if you can move it. Lucas nodded, stepping away from her. His eyes scanned the area, landing on a small rock nearby. It was nothing special, just a rock. But in that moment, it felt important. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, clearing his mind. Slowly, he reached out with his thoughts, trying to connect with the energy inside him. The power was there, faint but growing stronger. It was like feeling the pulse of the earth beneath his feet, the energy that connected everything. Lucas focused all his attention on the rock, willing it to move. He imagined it lifting into the air, feeling the force flow through his body, through his mind. Nothing happened. The rock remained firmly on the ground. Lucas exhaled sharply, frustration bubbling up inside him. I can't do it. It's not working. Seraphia remained silent, watching him closely. Don't give up. You're still trying to control the power with your mind. You need to feel it, not just think about it. Her words echoed in Lucas's mind. Feel it. He closed his eyes again and let go of his thoughts. This time, instead of focusing on controlling the rock with his mind, he focused on the energy. He felt it, that rush of power, like a river flowing through his veins. The energy wasn't something to control. It was something to be one with. Slowly, the rock began to shift, ever so slightly. It hovered just an inch above the ground. Lucas's heart raced. He wasn't imagining it. He had done it. The power was real. It was inside him, and he could control it, just barely. The rock floated higher, and Lucas opened his eyes to see it spinning gently in the air. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. Seraphia smiled, her eyes bright with approval. You're learning, Lucas. This is just the beginning. Lucas took a deep breath, feeling a mix of relief and awe. He had done it. For the first time, he had used the power inside him. But even as he celebrated his success, he knew there was more to come. This was just a taste of what was to come, the power he had barely begun to control. As he looked at Seraphia, he realized one thing. His journey was far from over, and the challenges ahead would test him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Lucas woke up with a sense of unease gnawing at him. The success he had felt in moving the rock still lingered in his mind, but it was no longer the only thought occupying his head. Seraphia had mentioned that this was just the beginning, and Lucas knew she wasn't just talking about his ability to move objects. There was more at stake, much more. The power that was awakening inside him, the ancient energy of the Agarthians, was linked to something far greater, something dangerous. As the days passed, the visions had become more frequent, more vivid. He could see glimpses of the past, flashes of an ancient civilization, cities covered in ruins, and beings of light with the ability to control time. But there was a recurring image, a shadow lurking in the corners of his mind, something that didn't belong. It was like an ominous presence, just beyond his reach, waiting to strike. He had tried to ignore it, but the feeling only grew stronger. There was a threat, a hidden danger that seemed to be connected to the very power he was learning to control. One evening, Seraphia took Lucas to a secluded area outside the colony. The night sky stretched above them, dotted with distant stars, and the air was still and quiet. It felt peaceful, but Lucas couldn't shake the tension in his chest. Lucas, Seraphia began, her voice serious. There's something you need to know. The Agarthians were not the only ones who left their mark on this world. Lucas raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Seraphia turned to him, her eyes intense. When the Agarthians vanished, their enemies did not disappear with them. There is a darkness that still lingers, a force that seeks to control the very power that you are awakening. They were the ones who made the Agarthians disappear in the first place. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. Who were they? And why didn't you tell me this before? They are called the Vastros, Seraphia said, her voice quiet but full of weight. A race that thrives on control and manipulation. They seek to harness the energy of the Agarthians to bend time and space to their will. They believe that by controlling this power, they can reshape the universe in their image. Lucas's heart began to race. So, they're after me. After the power inside me. Seraphia nodded grimly. Yes, they have been hunting for the descendants of the Agarthians for centuries, and you are their target now. The energy within you is a key that could open the door to unimaginable power. The Vastros know this, and they will stop at nothing to claim it. Why me? Lucas asked, still struggling to understand. Why am I the one they're after? Seraphia's expression softened. Because you are the one who can awaken the true power of the Agarthians. You are the last hope to restore balance, but you are also their greatest threat. The Vastros know this, and they won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who stands in their way. Lucas's mind raced as he tried to process the gravity of the situation. The visions, the power, the connection to the Agarthians, all of it was suddenly so much bigger than he had imagined. There were enemies out there, dark forces that would stop at nothing to control what he had inside him. A sharp sound broke through his thoughts. It was faint at first, like a distant rumble in the ground, but it quickly grew louder. A low, humming noise that vibrated through the air. Serafia's eyes narrowed, her posture alert. They're here. Before Lucas could react, a flash of movement darted across the dark sky. A blur of black shapes, circling above them like vultures. His heart pounded in his chest as the humming sound grew louder, now vibrating in his bones. "They found us," Serafia whispered, her tone urgent. "Prepare yourself. They will come for you, Lucas, and you must be ready." Lucas's mind raced. His first test had been small, just moving a rock. But now, the stakes were far higher. If the Vastros were truly coming for him, he had no choice but to face them head-on. He could feel the power inside him, still raw, still untamed. It wasn't enough to simply move small objects anymore. He would need every ounce of it to protect himself, to fight back. The night had just begun, but Lucas's journey was about to take a dangerous turn. The air was thick with tension as Lucas and Serafia stood together, facing the sky. The hum of the approaching threat grew louder, vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. The distant shapes in the sky were now more distinct, dark, shifting figures, moving swiftly toward them. They were not human, not anything Lucas had ever seen before. Their forms seemed to flicker and distort, like shadows in the night. "Stay close to me," Serafia ordered, her voice firm. "We need to be ready. The Vastros are masters of manipulation and deception. They will try to confuse you, to make you doubt yourself." Lucas nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never been in a real fight before. He was just an engineer, not a soldier. But now, everything had changed. The threat was real, and he was at the center of it. The power of the Agarthians was inside him, but he wasn't sure how to fully control it. "Can I fight them?" he asked, his voice shaky. Serafia's eyes were steady. "You have the power, Lucas, but you must focus. Trust in yourself. Trust in the energy inside you." As the shapes grew closer, the hum of their presence grew stronger. Lucas could feel the power building within him, as though it was waking up in response to the danger. His palms tingled with energy, and his breath became shallow. He didn't know if he was ready, but there was no turning back now. The figures landed in front of them with a loud metallic sound. They were tall, their bodies cloaked in dark, flowing robes. Their faces were hidden in shadow, but Lucas could feel their eyes on him, cold and calculating. The leader of the Vastros stepped forward, his presence overwhelming. He was different from the others. His robes shimmered with an unnatural light, and his voice was low and commanding. "The Agarthian power awakens," the Vastro leader said, his voice dripping with disdain. "And you, human, are the key. Hand over the power, and we will spare your life." Lucas felt a surge of fear, but it quickly turned into defiance. He didn't know how to fully control the power yet, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to give it up. Not without a fight. "I won't let you take it," Lucas said, his voice stronger than he felt. The Vastro leader's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "Very well. If you wish to die for it, so be it." The leader raised his hand, and a burst of dark energy shot toward Lucas. It was fast, like a streak of lightning. And for a moment, Lucas froze. But Serafia was faster. She pushed him aside, and the energy hit her instead. She was thrown backward, her body slamming into the ground with a sickening thud. "No," Lucas shouted, rushing to her side. Serafia's breathing was shallow, her face pale, but she managed to open her eyes. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice weak but steady. "I'll be fine. You need to focus, Lucas. They're not here to play. They'll try to break you. Don't let them." Lucas's chest tightened with fear and anger. He couldn't let them harm Seraphia, or anyone else for that matter. He had to do something. With a deep breath, Lucas focused. He reached deep inside himself, calling on the energy that had been growing within him. He could feel it now, pulsing and alive, like a living thing, waiting for him to unleash it. It was power like he had never imagined, and it felt both terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. He lifted his hands, and the air around him shimmered. The energy in his chest burst outward, and for the first time, he controlled it. A wave of force shot from his hands, striking the Vastro leader with such power that it sent him stumbling backward. The other Vastros hesitated for a moment, clearly surprised by the strength of Lucas's attack. The leader recovered quickly, however, and glared at him. "Impressive," he said, his voice cold. "But it won't be enough." The leader raised his hand again, and the air seemed to twist, warping as if reality itself was bending. Lucas could feel the pressure, the weight of the manipulation in the air. He knew the Vastros had power over space and time, and they weren't going to stop. But Lucas wasn't afraid anymore. The power inside him was growing stronger with each moment. He could feel it coursing through his veins, ready to be unleashed. "You're wrong," Lucas said, his voice steady. "I'm just getting started." Lucas stood his ground, feeling the surge of power deep inside him. The Vastro leader's eyes were cold, and the dark energy in the air pulsed around them. But Lucas wasn't afraid anymore. He had unlocked something within himself, and he wasn't going to let it go. The leader of the Vastros raised his hand once more, and with it, the world around them seemed to tremble. A dark, twisting energy shot out, aiming directly at Lucas, like a whip of pure destruction. Lucas didn't hesitate. He extended his arms and focused all the energy he could muster into his palms. The world seemed to slow as he called on the Agarthian power. His body buzzed with the force, and he let it build up, channeling it into a massive wave. With a shout, Lucas released the energy in a blast that collided with the Vastro's dark attack. The two forces met in a violent explosion of light and darkness, sending shockwaves through the air. The ground cracked beneath them, and the force of the collision knocked Lucas back, his body skidding across the dirt. For a moment, everything was silent. Dust filled the air, and the landscape around them seemed to hold its breath. Lucas lay on the ground, struggling to regain his balance. His body ached, and he could feel the strain of using so much energy. But he refused to give up. Through the haze, he saw the Vastro leader step forward, his eyes narrowed in anger. The others stood behind him, watching silently. They were regrouping, clearly not expecting Lucas to be so powerful. "You are stronger than I thought," the Vastro leader said, his voice cold and dangerous. "But you still don't understand the true nature of this power. It is not something you can control, human. You are just a pawn in a much larger game." Lucas clenched his fists, the energy still swirling inside him, burning like fire. He had no intention of letting the Vastros manipulate him. He had come too far to back down now. "I don't care about your game," Lucas said, standing up slowly. His voice was firm, filled with conviction. "I'm not giving up. This power is mine. It's mine to protect, and I'll fight for it." The Vastro leader's face twisted into a sneer. "So be it," he said, raising his hand once again. "But you will fall just like the others before you." With a sudden movement, the leader snapped his fingers, and a massive vortex of dark energy appeared in front of him. It spiraled violently, pulling in everything around them. Trees were uprooted, rocks lifted into the air, and the ground itself seemed to crack and shift as the Vastro tried to tear apart the very fabric of the world. Lucas felt the pull of the vortex, his feet sliding across the dirt, as if the earth was trying to swallow him. He gritted his teeth, focusing harder than ever before. The power inside him responded, roaring like a storm, and he reached deep, pulling it from the core of his being. He was stronger now, more connected than before. The energy swirled around him, lifting him off the ground. His vision blurred as he focused on the vortex, pushing against it with all his might. He was not going to let it consume him. "Seraphia," Lucas called out, his voice strained. "I need help." Seraphia, still recovering from the earlier attack, rose to her feet, her eyes burning with determination. She was weak, but she wasn't going to stand by and watch Lucas fight alone. With a quick movement, she channeled her own energy, creating a protective barrier around them. The barrier shimmered as it absorbed the force of the vortex. "Hold on, Lucas," she shouted. "We can do this together." Lucas nodded, his resolve hardening. The storm of energy around them was relentless, but with Seraphia's help, they had a chance. They were not alone in this fight. Together, they could stand against the Vastros. With a roar, Lucas released everything he had. The energy exploded outward in a blinding flash, overwhelming the vortex and pushing the dark force back. The Vastros were thrown off balance, their grip on the world momentarily weakened. The leader staggered, his expression one of shock and disbelief. He had underestimated them. And now, the tide was turning. Lucas stood tall, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. The power inside him still burned, but now it felt like a part of him, something he could control. He looked at Seraphia, who was smiling at him, her eyes filled with pride. "You did it, Lucas," she said, her voice soft but full of respect. But Lucas knew this fight wasn't over. The Vastros were not going to give up that easily. They were dangerous, and they would be back. He could feel their dark energy lingering in the air, and he knew that this was only the beginning of the battle. "I'm just getting started," Lucas said, determination in his voice. "We will stop them, Seraphia, no matter what it takes." The dust from the battle still hung heavy in the air, and the ground around them was cracked and scorched. Lucas stood firm, his body bruised and tired, but his spirit was stronger than ever. The Vastros had underestimated him, and now they were going to pay the price. Seraphia stood beside him, her eyes focused, her energy still flickering weakly from the earlier attack, but she refused to show any weakness. Together, they had managed to push the Vastros back. For now, the leader of the Vastros had been knocked off balance, but he wasn't done yet. His anger was palpable, and Lucas could feel it in the air. The Vastro leader slowly stood up, brushing the dirt off his dark robes. His eyes glowed with an unsettling light, and his expression was filled with cold fury. "You think you've won?" The Vastro leader sneered. "You are nothing. You are just a child playing with forces you don't understand. You cannot stop what's coming." Lucas's breath came in ragged gasps, but he straightened up, glaring at the leader. "I've had enough of your threats," he said, his voice steady. "You're not going to win. We're stopping you, here and now." The Vastro leader raised his hand, and the sky seemed to darken in response. The air was thick with his power, and the ground beneath them trembled as if it were alive. The Vastros behind him began to stir, their figures shifting like shadows, ready to attack again. Lucas could feel the weight of the battle pressing down on him. The energy inside him was still burning, but he was running out of strength. He had to finish this. They had to end it now, before the Vastros could regroup and strike again. "Seraphia," Lucas said, turning to her, "we need to combine our powers. We can't do this alone." Seraphia nodded without hesitation, her face hard with determination. She stepped closer to Lucas, placing her hand on his shoulder. "Together, Lucas. We are stronger together." Lucas closed his eyes for a moment, gathering all the energy inside him. He could feel it pulsing, the power of the Agarthians, raw, untamed, and waiting to be unleashed. He reached out, connecting his energy to Seraphia's. He felt her presence, her strength, and together, their power began to merge. The sky above them seemed to crack as the energy swirled around them. The ground beneath their feet shook violently, but neither of them flinched. The Vastros watched in silent fury, but they could do nothing as the combined force of Lucas and Seraphia built. Now, Lucas shouted, and with that single word, they released everything they had. A massive wave of energy exploded outward from them, crashing into the Vastros with the force of a hurricane. The ground was ripped apart, and the air seemed to shimmer with the power that was released. The Vastros screamed in terror as the energy washed over them, their forms flickering and distorting under its might. The Vastro leader tried to raise his hand, but the energy overwhelmed him. He was thrown back, crashing into the ground with a deafening roar. The other Vastros faltered, their strength drained, their power shattered. In that moment, Lucas knew it was over. They had won. The storm of energy slowly faded, and the world around them grew still. The remnants of the Vastros' dark forces vanished into the night, leaving only silence behind. The battle was over, but the cost had been great. Lucas collapsed to his knees, his body drained from the intense use of power. Seraphia knelt beside him, her face pale but filled with relief. "You did it, Lucas," she said, her voice soft but filled with admiration. "You stopped them." Lucas could barely find the strength to smile. His body hurt, and his mind was spinning from the battle. But he knew that they had won. They had stopped the Vastros, and the threat was finally over. For a moment, everything was quiet. The stars above them shone brightly, and the world seemed at peace once more. But Lucas knew this was only the beginning. The Agarthian power inside him was still growing, still awakening, and there would be more challenges to face, more battles to fight. He looked at Seraphia, who was still watching him, her silver eyes filled with trust. "What happens now?" he asked. Seraphia smiled faintly. "Now, we rebuild, together." And with that, Lucas knew that no matter what came next, he was ready. The journey was far from over, but he was no longer the same man who had arrived on this planet. He was stronger, and he had a purpose.